Who are you and how do you identify?
I am Mr. Gallagher and I teach IM2 and sophomore engineering. I am a cis gay male.
Hello, my name is Dale Tanner.
Well, hi, nice to meet you virtually. My name's Jacqueline Gross. I go by Miss Gross or Miss G at school, and I identify as bisexual.
I identify as male, he, him, and I'm bisexual.
I'm Jeffrey and identify as gay.
I am Miss Lynn and I identify as a bisexual woman. I teach science at Lee High School and I am the GSA advisor.
Hey Longhorns, this is Mrs. Adams, one of your assistant principals. I have a brother who is 7 years younger than me. He does identify as gay.
I'm Catherine Berry, and I identify as she, her, and I'm going to say bisexual.
And I'm Devette Berry, and I also identify as she, her, and I would say lesbian.
My name is Russ Mattis. I teach SAI World History. I teach SAI Government and 2 sections of academic support here at Lee. I identify as heterosexual male.
I am Vivian. I am one of the presidents of the GSA, and I am bisexual and genderqueer.
So what was it like, I guess, growing up gay?
I grew up in rural Indiana. The people around me were not very accepting of the LGBTQ community, and it led to struggles. But I moved out here, and that is not to say that the Bay Area is without struggles for the LGBTQ community.
How old were you when you became aware of your identity?
I was 8, but I didn't come out until I was 16. So not only did I grow up in a rural area, let's not forget that at this time, like, same-sex marriage was still not legal. When I realized that I was gay, we were still at the point in time where The Office had a gay character, and that was a huge deal. So I didn't come out until 8 years later.
I think it was like 10, 10 or 11, or maybe even 12. It's kind of shoddy. Basically, I was in 6th grade. We were learning about all the gays and was like, oh, I feel nothing for women. And I went from there.
So I was in elementary school for sure, probably like in 6th grade, 5th or 6th grade. And I noticed myself, it's kind of around that age where you start having crushes, right? And I definitely noticed myself having crushes on both guys and girls. And so kind of immediately knew something was different about me. And that's kind of when I first came to the realization.
I was 19.
I think it was when I met you. I'm going to say I was 26, 25, 26.
It just wasn't talked about. It wasn't talked about as much in high school. So I didn't put like a name to feelings until a little bit later when it was more talked about, I guess.
Well, it really wasn't even talked about then. Only in your circle group. It wasn't like you could be open and out. Especially in the work world, that was tough.
All right, so do you want to share your coming out story with us?
My family was not the most supporting of the LGBTQ community.
And I first discovered that I was bisexual when I was in like 7th grade, so I was like 13. And I've only ever officially come out once, and it was at a party with my friends, and we were all just sitting in a circle talking, and it was really funny because we all sort of came out to each other at the same time. You know, we're just kind of like, yeah, we're all not as straight as we initially thought. But other than that, I've never really come out, just because I tend to mention being bisexual very like casually. Most of the people in my life know that I'm bisexual, but I remember there was one conversation I was having with someone where I was just talking with them and I casually mentioned something about being bi, and they just looked at me really weirdly and they were like, I thought you were straight. And they were totally accepting and cool about it, but it was just because I never made a big deal about coming out because I knew that I didn't have to. Because the people in my life are all super accepting and inclusive, and I'm lucky enough to have that experience, so I never felt the need to come out. And I don't know, I just feel really grateful that I have such a loving and supportive community around me that I never even felt like I needed to announce that I was, you know, attracted to both men and women. So, yeah.
Basically, I was like, hey, mom, I'm gay. And she was like, well, you're confused. And I was like, yeah, maybe 12 and you're probably right, but like, I know it, you know? And she was like, yeah, no. And now she's like, yeah, he's probably gay. So now things are better.
I'm not sure I have one. Other than that, my family knew that I was living with Devet. They had figured everything out. And, you know, when I finally told my family about it, they were like, oh, we know, you know, no big deal.
So when I was away at my first year at college, maybe it was my second year at college, and then I came home for one of my holiday breaks, and I had definitely been while I was away at university, you know, been able to be more myself. And then I came home at one of my holiday breaks, and I told my parents that was happening, and they also. My dad was very like, yeah, kind of, okay, I know. And then my mom was asking me lots and lots of questions, but very like scientific, you know, like.
Well, she is the biology teacher.
Yeah, she's a high school biology teacher. But, you know, it took them a while to get with it, but they were never, my parents were never they were never judgmental. It was just like more
Curious.
Curious,
Yeah.
you know, scientifically.
I don't think I've actually come out as genderqueer, but I also don't think that they really care that much. But I came out as bisexual in like middle school. Yeah, I kind of just like sat down and I was like, hey, can you pause the TV? They did, and then I was like, hey, I think I'm bisexual, and they were like, cool, can we finish watching our show now? And that was kind of it. They just didn't really care at all.
I was walking to school one morning and I was like texting my friend back and forth, and I was kind of like, I don't think I'm a girl. And they were like, sick. And I thought I sat on that for a bit until like around lunchtime when I was with my friends and we were just sitting chilling, and I was kind of like, hey guys, I think I'm a guy and I think you guys should call me Miles. And they were like, duly noted.
I mean, the funny thing about coming out is I feel like you come out over and over again to each new person that you meet almost, or each new person that you date. So it's kind of like an over and over again process. And then with my parents, it was a little bit harder. My parents I think they already knew. And then they just asked me one day and they were like, you're not straight, are you? So luckily my family did the work kind of for me. But then I will say, like with each new romantic partner, it does feel like I have to come out over and over again because all my friends know and all of my family knows.
Did you have like concerns about it when like leading up to it?
With my friends, no. They're pretty open and I love them dearly and we're all very close, and I was never scared that they would reject me or get upset. There was never a concern with how they would react. I always knew that they would accept me no matter what, but it was just more the underlying anxiety of something's going to be different.
Do you have any advice on coming out, like for today's youth?
So all I would have to say is it's all in your own time. Don't feel rushed to come out to anyone. It doesn't have to be your family immediately. It can just be some friends or some very like close people to you. And then kind of when you've built up the courage, you can come out to your family or some other people that you think might take the news a little bit harder. But mostly just take your time and don't let anyone, take that from you.
If you're considering coming out, to make sure that you are in a safe situation to do so. So if that means that, you're coming out to your friends because you are confident that they're going to accept you, but you don't come out to your family right away, then that's fine. If you feel like your family is going to accept you no matter what, then coming out to your family is probably, a no-brainer and you can do it. But if that fear is real in you and you feel like, there is some part of you that feels like your family won't accept you, at this time in your life, do you have the means to support yourself and to be able to survive if that in fact does happen? So my biggest concern with coming out is safety. Know yourself, know your people in your life, and kind of you know them the best. Do you feel like they're going to accept you, or do you feel like you could potentially not be accepted and then have to deal with that? It's a very personal thing.
Don't be nervous. Start small. It'll get a lot better. It feels great.
Make sure that whoever you're coming out to is not going to ruin your life. So always make sure that you're safe to whoever you're coming out to, and it is a process. And each time you have to decipher whether or not this person is going to be safe to come out to or not. But you really just want to, be safe. Can you briefly describe some of LGBTQ people you've seen or met that have had an impact on you in your life?
In college, I met my husband, who was an amazing influence on my prospering as an LGBTQ person. And he really helped me to figure out who I was and get into this community, that sort of thing. And we will actually be celebrating our 5th anniversary in a month.
Yeah, I'm pretty close with quite a few members of the LGBT community, as well as I have a family member who's particularly close that's also a part of the community. I was usually surrounded by a lot of representation, which I'm thankful for.
I have some artists and peeps I look up to who are LGBT, like Thomas Sanders, like ABD Illustrates, and a few others.
I think for me, growing up, there was one person, actually one of my mom's closest friends, who was a lesbian. And I related to her a lot just because I knew that she, like me, was different, right? And so I kind of gravitated towards her just because I knew that there was, a kind of commonality between us. And so I looked up to her and saw, her lifestyle and what she kind of went through in her life, and definitely looked up to her.
I talked to one of my mom's friends before I talked to my mother, and my mom's friend who was gay, actually lived here in the Bay Area, and he encouraged me to be honest with my parents, and it was really good advice. My mother's a very good friend from high school was an openly gay man, and he was very clear about it. So I knew growing up that he was that. And so when I was coming out to myself, I used him as a sounding board, and he was so, so helpful. So he actually was a professor at Stanford. So it was kind of a shishi guy. He was very, very helpful.
Okay, so looking back on your high school experience, what was it like for you focusing specifically on your sexual orientation?
So the local GSA club was actually very helpful to me. However, it was a struggle to have because we had several teachers who would go around tearing down flyers and stuff. And the parents would write letters that they felt like their children were being indoctrinated. So it was a club that had maybe 4 or 5 people, and it wasn't very well advertised. My first meeting was actually when I went to go talk with them about how to come out to my parents. So that was very, very helpful, and it really was. And I very much so appreciated it.
Have you ever faced any discrimination from being gay?
Yeah, I would say probably the most significant time was what I remember. I had this roommate in college, and I will not name her, but we shared a bedroom because that's how college is. We're all broke and have a lot of roommates. So we shared a bedroom, and I was very nervous to tell her that I had a girlfriend anyway, just because I had a feeling that she wasn't going to accept it. So I remember after she found out that I had a girlfriend, she started going to the bathroom to change in our shared room, and she would turn around and just was very nervous to, I don't know, just do normal things that you would do with a roommate in the room with me. And I never actually said anything or brought it up to her, but it felt really, really bad because, you're like, just because I'm attracted to your gender doesn't mean that I'm attracted to every single person of your gender. We kind of have a stereotype of being like over sexualized or like greedy, or there's a couple of really bad stereotypes with it. So I would definitely say that that was probably the worst one.
I'll never forget this. It was freshman year, a little bit after I just officially came out as Miles. And my math teacher at the time, we were looking for a substitute, so she wasn't permanent. But I went up to her and I was disclosing what was going on. I was like, I go by Miles now. I would prefer if you would respect that. And at first she was like, yeah, of course. But I walked into class the next time I had it, and she called me out in front of the entire class, alongside the principal was there, and so was one of the APs, and she used the wrong name on purpose. And I didn't respond at first, and then she kept repeating my name. And I was like, yeah, I get it. And I went to go talk to her about it after class because I was very upset for clear reasons. And she kind of blew up on me. She's like, no, you don't get to do that. That's not your name. You're not a boy. You don't deserve that. She was like, I'm gonna tell your parents. That was a rough day. But like right after, I kind of just left in a hurry because I was very upset. Other than that, it's been a pretty decent experience.
There were people within the LGBT community that were actually not accepting of being bisexual. In fact, that was kind of a point of contention for some people within the community, that I was bisexual rather than, a lesbian or straight ally, right? So when I was going through this in the past, bisexuality was kind of looked down upon within the LGBT community. It was kind of, you just need to make a decision. And it was kind of like that bisexuality wasn't existing. It was kind of along the same lines as transgender. Both of those two identities really were kind of frowned upon within the LGBT community. But again, now it's a lot better.
We hear stories in the news a lot about bullying, exclusion, harassment, or other struggles of LGBTQ plus youth today. But we also see in some places like greater acceptance. So what do you think are some particularly difficult challenges of the LGBTQ plus youth? And like speaking from a personal standpoint, what are your views on what's going on in today's world?
I think things are much better. Things are more out in the open. Young people are more accepting and embracing of each other, regardless of where you are on the spectrum. And I've learned so much from just the young people in my life about, asking people about their pronouns and trying to be more aware of situations. And I think there's a lot less, even for older people, a lot less discrimination in the workplace than there used to be. When I was first working out of college, I was afraid to let anyone know anything. I was afraid I might lose my job or not be promoted. And I don't think that that's the case anymore. At least I think probably not in California. Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of places where young people are growing up in communities that are not as accepting.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say when you answered that question, is that we are lucky to live in an area where you have resources like the GSA, and they have it available to you in high school. And I don't think that exists in every state in this country, certainly in not every country. And then the other part of the question that I would answer is about the transgenders. That has evolved quite a bit, and even I've had to learn a lot more about what transgender people go through, and being accepting of what they need from what support they need.
Yeah, and there's still so much in the bullying and violence on the transgender community still. So we've got a long way to go.
What was your reaction when they came out to you?
I'm not sure they really specifically came out. I guess Jake did.
Yeah.
So and I would hope that, Vivian, that we were sort of non-judgmental and saying, great, good for you.
You kind of were just like, can we watch TV now?
I'd say though that I've struggled more just trying to be respectful of transgender pronouns. Just having had a niece that was born, and I've referred to her whole life, and now they have educated me that they want to be referred to as they, and
it's hard for us old people.
Well, it's a transition of 17 years of saying things one way and having to get accustomed. And
we're trying.
I'm trying, and I'm also seeking forgiveness for my stumbling. It's not out of a place of judgment. It's more out of a place of
it's retraining.
Yeah, retraining my brain. So you guys be patient with old people. Transitioning our neural pathways.
I tell them that all the time.
Good advice.
A family member that's LGBTQ+, and what do they identify as?
I have a gay aunt and a gay uncle. My mom was one of 8 children born to my grandmother. Well, actually, she was one of 10. 2 died of polio in the 50s. Of the 8 that lived, one of the males and one of the females were gay. And so I thought that the percentage of gay population in the United States was around 25%, because that's how many of my aunts and uncles, that's the percentage of my relatives that were gay that I could tell as a kid. So it was like, I would say that it was awkward because, it was not something that we openly spoke about, and they didn't just bring friends to family gatherings. That's not what it looked like. Although that's certainly the way it was approached in my family in the 70s. But obviously it turns out, that they were both LGBTQ.
So I guess when really was it when you realized that your aunt and uncle were gay?
I wasn't left with any bad impression. I just was left with I think Auntie likes women, and I think my uncle, I think my uncle likes men. Not that there was any value judgment placed on it. My uncle, obviously, he married a man, recently in the last several years. So I didn't attend his wedding, but I know my parents and my sisters were there. Some of my cousins were there. It was a family celebration. My aunt is living alone at this point, but I know that she has had long-term relationships with women over her lifetime, and it was, they were still my aunt and uncle, right? Our relationship was not affected by it. Their sexuality didn't affect our relationship, and so I always appreciated that I was left with, that choice has nothing to do with me, and it certainly didn't affect, the way I love them or received love from them. My aunt's my aunt, my uncle's my uncle. And I got an extra uncle out of my uncle,
So one of the most difficult aspects facing LGBTQ+ youth today is the question of family acceptance. Yeah. So in your opinion, how important was it and is it to integrate the family into the support of LGBTQ+ people and youth?
I see this as like a ridiculous tragedy in many cases. I see people struggling so much with this, and I see families being, acting so in ways that I find totally unacceptable. So the bottom line is that the people you're attracted to is none of my business. I've got people that I can disappoint, right? That I'm attracted to right now. I plan to disappoint those people thoroughly. That's my business. Who you plan to disappoint or thrill is your business. I care one little bit, not at all, who you're attracted to or why. What I care about is that you learn to give love and receive love from people. However that looks for you is not my problem. I worry much less about what other people are doing and why than about the things I've got to do, right? Relationships are tough enough. And I've seen a lot of people like struggle and not have family acceptance. And it's like, man, that's the last thing that I would withhold is acceptance based on something so personal to you, something that doesn't even affect me. It's not a choice I have to make, right? I got to be accountable for my choices. Uh, and so I want people to have the opportunity to be accountable for their choices without my judgment. It doesn't matter to me. So not every family works that way, but I could see why it's hard, especially when you come to awareness at a young age. I came to awareness of what interested me, you know, as a teenager. It doesn't really affect me, the choices that others make, right? That's where I've gotten to in my life. And I hope that, I hope other people can get to that place for themselves too, right? Because ultimately we end up in relationships no matter what other people say. Is it better? Is it easier with approval and support? Yes. Yes, it is. Does it happen anyway? Yes. Yes, it does. So, right. So no matter what other people say and think, we move forward, right? With what motivates us, with what ticks our heart. So, it takes a village. It takes a village to raise young people. So then there's plenty of support out there, I think.
I have a brother who is 7 years younger than me. And so growing up, we were close, but not close in age. He does identify as gay. And I remember when he came out to me, he was in his early 20s, and he did come out in the family, at least he came out to me first. He said it was kind of like a warm up for coming out to my parents. I was not surprised by him coming out. I was happy for him. I was just happy that he was embracing his identity and himself, because he had struggled with that growing up, feeling kind of insecure and trying to fit in where it wasn't as natural for him to fit in. So I was just happy to see him being himself and starting to own that identity a little bit more. A couple of weeks later, he came out to our parents, and they also were not surprised. My mom was a little more emotional than I expected, because she was just happy for him, but also worried about him and hoping that he'd be able to have a happy life and be accepted and have all the things that we knew he wanted, like a significant other. And he had always talked about having kids and having a family. And so we just really wanted him to be able to have the life that he wanted. So I think when he came out to her, it made it more real, even though she was not surprised. So she just worried a little bit about him, hoping he'd be able to have a good life. I think some of the most difficult things that LGBT plus youth face is that kind of embracing of their identities and being able to be their whole selves, without it really being like a thing, that they can just exist the way that other people can and be accepted and loved and have friends, all the things that humans want. And I saw that with my brother. He grew up in a different area than I did. I was already in college when he was in middle school and stuff. And he grew up in an area that was very religious. A lot of families were very invested in and belonged to the church. And also the Boy Scouts was a really big thing where he was growing up. And so I saw him kind of trying on these things, like going to church, which unfortunately became a really negative experience for him. He was talking about things that didn't really make sense with our family's values and his own identity, talking about things being related to the devil and being a sin. And that was just not what our family believed. And so we really felt for him during that time. Even though he wasn't out, we had suspected that he was grappling with some of that, with his sexual identity. And so it was hard to watch. It was really hard to watch. And the Boy Scouts also were openly against having gay members. And so it was hard to watch him try to fit in there when I suspected that he would probably be identifying as gay one day. But he came a long way. He got involved with some different things at school, including theater, and found a community there and was able to really grow and make friends. And then he loved throwing big dinner parties for all his friends. And so it became much more positive for him the more he pursued the things he was passionate about and surrounded himself with people who were accepting of however he might act or whatever he might feel. So that was really good to see. And I think just families and friends in general, encourage the people in your life to be themselves. It can be easy in a family to want people to play a role that works with the family and the expected dynamic. But I think it's just so important to embrace people for who they are and where they are, not make assumptions about who they are, but always letting them know that you're there for them, you're there to listen, and that you accept whatever they bring your way. And that's what I'm trying to do with my brother now. He does have a significant other in his life. He has a fiance, and they plan to get married in the next year. And I'm so happy for them. And I just try to make sure that I include his fiance on all of our group chats and, embrace him into the family the same way that I would regardless of my brother's sexual identity. So I'm proud of him. He's an amazing person, and I think he's going to have that happy life that he always wanted. So I'm happy for that for him as well.
What was it like, I guess, being raised by two members of the LGBT?
Well, okay, so first of all, I have two moms. One of them is bisexual and the other one is a lesbian. Okay, so I don't really know how to compare, being raised by lesbian moms to, straight parents that well, because I never was raised by straight parents. But yeah, so my dad never really lived with us. He lived in the same city until I was 2, and then we moved from Texas to California. But growing up with my parents, it was always very accepting of everyone in my house. There was never really any fear of me coming out. I mean, I always knew that I would be accepted. I actually didn't know my mom was bisexual until like a couple months ago. She didn't necessarily keep it a secret. It just wasn't really something we talked about at all. It was just like, because she's married to my mom, it was just like, oh yeah, she's probably gay. But then she was like, actually, I think I'm bisexual this summer. And that was interesting that happened. But yeah, I feel like also something interesting that happened was that the children always were more accepting than the parents. Just because I feel like it was easier to understand that they could love someone the same regardless of gender. Yeah, so a lot of my friends growing up were very accepting, but not always their parents were not always accepting.
Did you ever face any negative or positive experiences with either your identity or your parents?
We were going to get passports, and they wouldn't let my mom, my adoptive mom, sign the passports because she wasn't my real mom, which is that really hurt her, and I remember her being very hurt by that. I do vividly remember this, being painful for her that she wasn't being recognized. This was only 3-4 years ago. Yeah, so I just really felt bad for her at that time. And also, do you have any family members that are in the LGBTQ plus community?
I do have a niece who is talks about their pronoun as being they. So
and another niece who's bisexual.
Another niece that's bisexual. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Just to, I guess, wrap this up, can you give some words of encouragement to our LGBT students at Lee?
So everything gets easier in time. It really does. As I've gotten older, you become an adult and you exclusively deal with the people that you want to. I think the best way I can describe it is adulthood is amazing. Like, for example, if I wanted to, I could go out to the store and buy a cake and eat a whole cake for dinner. Is that a wise decision? No, but it gets better because I have that option anytime I want to.
Thank you so much for that.
To find people that you feel comfortable and safe with being yourself, and don't minimize yourself and don't feel like that you need to change for anyone else. And again, I will repeat that it's okay to come out at any time that it feels safe to you, and to anyone that it feels safe to come out to. It doesn't have to be all at once. But also find people that you feel comfortable and safe with, because that's really part of it. That's really what encouraged me to come out, was finding people that I knew I could share that truth with. And knew that they would handle it well and still love me.
You don't owe anyone an explanation. You can give it to anyone you feel like, but you do not owe anyone anything, as well as labels aren't permanent. Sometimes they stick, sometimes they don't, but it's okay if they don't.
Okay, time to be positive. You're gonna do it. You're gonna be great. You're gonna be awesome. You're gonna be so cool. It's gonna be awesome.
All right, thank you, Jeffrey.
I want to say that, you know, your experiences that you might be having that are negative today aren't going to be the same, you know, 5 years from now. And that things that may look like they're really, you know, bad and bleak and hopeless right now, those things will change. When you look at, you know, what your life was like in high school when you're in your 20s, you're going to see that, oh, wow, things are so much better now. And so I would just say that find a person, maybe two, could be an adult, could be friends that you feel comfortable talking to and that will listen to you without judgment, and use those people as, you know, sounding board. My biggest point of advice would be that you're not alone, and you know, we're all here to help, and we're all here to be there for you. So I encourage students to become involved in the LGBT community if that's their truth and their path, whether that be joining the GSA or going to the LGBTQ plus youth space or something like that. But realize that there are people out there that you can connect to and you can find solace with.
Thank you so much.
You are very welcome.
The world needs you exactly how you are. You're complete and perfect, and that's what we need. We don't need you to change for us. We need you to be the best example of you can be.
Thank you so much. And thank you for spending some time with us and sharing your truth with us.
I appreciate you guys giving me an opportunity. I appreciate sharing.
There's always going to be a friend group that's going to accept you for who you are. It might not be every friend group, but there is going to be someone somewhere that will accept you for who you are. And you're just never going to be alone, especially in California. This might not be the case other places in the country, but especially at Lee, there's always going to be someone that will accept you for who you are, regardless of your gender.
Because I've seen so many changes just accelerating, just even when I think about from when I was in high school to now, and how much exponentially the embracing and acceptance of people has grown. And so I feel really, really confident with the young people today. And I feel like they're going to power on the movement in the right direction. And I just am amazed and honored to see so many young people out there speaking their truth. I think it's amazing.
Doing what you guys are doing now, you'll be so much more confident as life goes on, so that you have this support and you know avenues and channels that to provide support for you. And I'm also very encouraged that you guys will lead us in an area of improvement.